So I'm sure by now you've probably made your decision on who you support based on what you watched in season 1 of House of the Dragon. Either you support the Greens with Aegon as king, or you support the Blacks with Rhaenyra as queen. But I'm going to give you a quick argument for what I believe are the best reasons to support the Greens. And then I'll give you an argument for what I believe are the best reasons to support the Blacks. And at the end, I'll tell you who's obviously the right choice. And you can tell me in the comments what you think. So let's go ahead and get started with the Green claim first. And I think it's important to point out for the Black loyalists that in order for there to be the Dance of the Dragons, we would need to acknowledge that the Greens are pointing out a legitimate issue for the throne. And they are legitimate based on the history of the realm. Westeros has only known male heirs, and to set a new precedent was only due to the fact that there was no male heir present. However, you have a king in Viserys who believes that the matter is resolved. Yet, it is important to point out that Viserys does expect that the firstborn son to Rhaenyra and Laenor will eventually become king, so he's not establishing a new rule for inheritance permanently, but he is making this one exception. But here's where the Greens have an argument, and that is the legitimacy of Jace is in question, and we as an audience know that Jace is in fact a bastard. So this brings up a few issues. For one, it does undermine the realm in its entirety. It undermines House Velaryon and Vaemon's rightful claim to Driftmark, and speaks to a greater issue because of this. The claim for Vaemon isn't just rejected, he is killed for pointing out why his claim is valid, and regardless of Viserys' denial, we, the audience, know that Rhaenyra has falsely claimed that her kids are Laenor Velaryons and that Luke is heir to Driftmark. The rules and laws of Westeros are under attack by Rhaenyra, not only by the established precedent of the oldest male being named heir, but the legitimacy of that heir is equally important. Rhaenyra has selfishly disrupted House Velaryon to protect her secrets, and while many may claim Aegon unfit as a ruler, in season 1 alone, audiences watch Rhaenyra lie and deceive everyone in the story except for Daemon, and if she were to have it her way, she would deceive the entire realm and place her bastard son on the Iron Throne and claim he's trueborn. Now, we can point to the double standards of women mothering bastards compared to men fathering bastards, and we can focus on the issue of that hypocrisy, and we can focus on the question of legitimacy of a bastard-born child being archaic and how this represents the injustice within the patriarchy, and we could make it all about that, and Rhaenyra could make it all about that, but she doesn't at all. Many fans seem to conflate the ideals of Daenerys from A Song of Ice and Fire and the show Game of Thrones, and they project that onto Rhaenyra. But unlike Daenerys, Rhaenyra is not out to break the wheel. She simply wishes to inherit that wheel. Now, even though the Great Council, you could argue, was sexist against Rhaenys' claim, the elective monarchy that took place spoke the will of the noble houses of Westeros, and they selected Viserys. And yes, this is mostly because he was a male claimant, but that was the will of the people that the crown is set to rule. If Varys held another great council to determine who would be heir between his daughter Rhaenyra and his son Aegon, you could conclude that the result would be Aegon. The people of Westeros did not choose Rhaenyra. They were called to swear fealty to Rhaenyra or openly oppose the king and his heir and their dragons. The simplest argument that can be made is that the people of Westeros, if given a choice, and the truth of Rhaenyra's children, at least would desire a new heir. They would choose Aegon, but they would likely call for Rhaenyra to receive punishment. So I think that's my most simple argument for the Greens' claim. Sure, Aegon has the Conqueror's crown and sword, but my main point is that this is who I believe the people of Westeros would choose if given the truth and the choice. Now we move on to my quick argument for the Blacks and Rhaenyra. And this may be a bit more complicated because as an audience, we can have a perspective that the people of Westeros just don't have available to them. Firstly, I want to address something. There's a common sentiment among Green supporters that Viserys actually broke the rules by not following the typical line of succession, and there's others that saw the elective monarchical process as a suggestion that Westeros is a constitutional monarchy, but that's not true. But I understand why the first scene in House of the Dragon would lead you to that conclusion. King Jaehaerys held the Great Council at his own discretion to avoid the inevitable conflict if his chosen heir was opposed. And if you read the source material, you know war was imminent no matter who he chose. So an election between all the great houses was held. And I know George R.R. Martin takes a lot of inspiration from the War of Roses, but it's not based on the War of the Roses. It's only influenced. And sometimes fans don't always make that distinction. Also, I want to be clear that it's not me claiming that Westeros is an absolute monarchy. George R.R. Martin has labeled Westeros an absolute monarchy. This is a statement George R.R. Martin made in 2018 in the New York Times, and forgive me, he was discussing Donald Trump, so please don't fill my comment section with our own politics. This is just something I'm using for reference. So when he was asked, who does Donald Trump remind you of in A Song of Ice and Fire? This was his response. Quote, well, that's amusing, but I think even during the campaign, I said that Trump reminded me most of Joffrey. They have the same level of emotional maturity, and Joffrey likes to remind everyone that he's king, and he thinks that gives him the ability to do anything. And we're not an absolute monarchy, like Westeros is, unquote. The point I am trying to make is just that, yes, Viserys does have the power to name Rhaenyra heir over his son if he chooses to do so. As he does not answer to anyone, he is the absolute authority. So he may have some flawed thinking, and perhaps he should have taken into consideration that the conflict brewing before the Great Council would repeat itself if he didn't change the succession or hold another Great Council, but he didn't do that. To simply summarize the claim for Rhaenyra, her claim is the law set forth within his power as king, Viserys. To oppose this is to oppose the king, which then would make you an open rebellion. Now, when it comes to Rhaenyra's children, again, this is kind of irrelevant because if she ascends the throne, she has absolute power and could continue with her lies about their father or tell the truth and have them naturalized as Targaryens, which the agreement was for them to take the name Targaryen when they inherited the Iron Throne anyway, so most wouldn't notice. And the Greens, specifically Otto Hightower, can't make the argument that it's breaking tradition when the typical hereditary monarchy he undermined in the beginning is being undermined now. Tradition would have been to leave Daemon as heir until Viserys had a son, and Otto counseled against this to name Rhaenyra. And maybe Otto should have been more adamant that Rhaenyra should only be heir until Viserys remarries and has a male heir apparent. But he didn't do that. But who actually does have the rightful claim now? Rhaenyra or Aegon? Rhaenyra is the rightful heir to the throne. The simplest claim is that Viserys, with absolute authority, named her heir and denied any other claim. More so, for the rest of the realm, the noble lords of Westeros swore their house's fealty to Rhaenyra. So whether it be the Lannisters or the Baratheons, they are breaking their house's oaths to the crown. However, my personal opinion, and what I think would be best for Westeros, I actually believe that the Greens would create the most sustainable future for Westeros, because regardless of whether Rhaenyra is the rightful and lawful heir, there will always be someone that wishes to restore a male on the Iron Throne, and it's not really a question of if there'd be a rebellion, just a question of when. Also, it's fine that Rhaenyra could naturalize Jace, but ultimately the way she deceives the Velaryons and has them believe that their son is dead, that's pretty messed up, and not really a quality you want in a ruler. But Aegon doesn't have much better qualities either, so I understand that. But yes, I would choose the Greens, but not because I'm a Green supporter. I just believe that if Aegon was named heir in the beginning once he was born, the Dance of the Dragons never would have happened, and I think that's kind of obvious. But that doesn't matter now. And the realm will burn because Viserys refused to acknowledge the inevitable war derived out of what you could call a sexist prejudice against female heirs. That's right, I'm blaming Viserys for all of it. But hey, he really was a great character, and I think he was the best part of Season 1, and I talk more about that and more in this video here.